What's up everybody, welcome back. I am Nick and this week we're going to be building this DIY bookcase. If you ever wanted to start on woodworking or build a project, this is definitely the one to start on. We're going to break it down for you step by step, show you everything you need to know, tools, material, and everything else that goes into this build. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's the list of tools that we use during this project. We'll also follow this up with a material list and a cut list. So if you need to pause these, feel free to do that so you can write everything down. Now that we've got all the tools and materials needed, we're going to work on our cut list and start with the plywood and get everything cut to size. We're using our table saw to get all of our plywood ripped down to the necessary sizes. If you don't have a table saw, you can use your circular saw. Just make sure you get nice straight lines and focus on keeping your cuts as straight as possible. After we get the widths cut on the table saw, we're going to go over to the miter saw and cut the lengths for the shelves and the sides. So I'm getting ready to cut the back panel of the bookcase on our 1/2 inch plywood here, and we're going to cross cut this. And sometimes when you cross cut a piece of plywood with a circular saw, you get a lot of tear out. So a good trick to that is put a piece of painter's tape down, then draw your line on there and make your cut on there. That tape will hold down both sides so you don't get the tear out. Now that all the plywood portions are cut, I'm going to work on the feet for the bookshelves. The feet for this bookshelf are optional, so if you don't want feet, you can just skip this portion if you'd like. I started with ripping the 2x4 to 3 inches in width, and then I made a mark at 2 inches off of the edge. Now I'm going to set the saw to 45 degrees, and I'm going to make sure that my cut stops at that 2-inch mark. After the 45 degree cut, we're going to set the saw back to 0 and cut a total length of 3.5 inches. Now just repeat that process 3 more times and you'll have all of the feet. Once your cut list is complete, it should look something like this. Before we get to assembly, we're going to sand down any rough spots on the plywood. Time to assemble the base portion. I'll start by pre-drilling a hole into the 6-inch piece of the base, adding some glue to the other side, and then attaching it to the outside of the 53-inch long base portion with 2.5-inch long screws. Now just repeat the same steps on the other side. This base is going to serve 2 purposes. First, it's going to give us something to attach our feet to, and second, it's a structural piece for the rest of the bookshelf to help us keep everything in line and square. Time to attach the feet to the base. I'll start by pre-drilling 2 holes, adding some glue to the bottom of the feet, and then facing the angled portion of the foot inwards, and then attaching 2 screws through the top of the base. And then I'll just repeat that 3 more times. When you're done, you should have something like this. Don't worry about cleaning up any imperfections or filling any holes. All of that will be covered by the rest of the bookshelf. Next, we're going to attach the base to the back panel of the bookshelf. I start with spreading some glue along the bottom of the back panel, and then I attach the base to the back panel. I'm lining it up so that the feet are still hanging down past the back panel. I'm just attaching with brad nails right now, and we can come back later with screws. Next, we're going to attach the sides of the bookshelf. We're going to use the same method by lining it up with the bottom of the base, and then hitting a couple brad nails into the base, and then brad nailing along into the back panel all the way up. Now it's time to attach the shelves. We're going to start with the bottom shelf. We're going to add some glue to the base and then attach it with brad nails to the base. Next, I'm going to move on to the top of the shelf. I apply glue to all 3 sides and attach it the same way. Time to attach our shelf supports. So what I did was measure 12.5 inches from the bottom shelf And that's where I started with the first shelf support, and then I measured another 12.5 inches from that shelf support and attached the second one, and did the same thing for the third shelf support, and then moved on and did the other side as well. Then we'll add some glue to the top of those, and we'll slide each shelf in and attach those to the shelf supports. So now we're almost done with the carcass of the bookcase, but I want to add a couple screws through the back into each shelf just to add a little more support, because I know there's going to be a lot of books on each shelf here. So what I'm going to do is measure from the ends here to the center of the shelf. This is 14.25, so I'm going to go back behind, measure up 14.25, and add a screw center point on each of these. So we're going to come up 14.25, give ourselves a mark. We want to add 2. Just to be safe. So I've got our number 6 3/4 inch long screws. You don't want nothing too big because it'll go right through that plywood and split it. And that's all. Now I'm going to repeat that same thing for the next 2 shelves and we'll be good to go. Now it's time to move on to the face frame for the bookshelf. I'm going to start on the end here, getting this measurement. 48 3/16. I'm just going to double check this side, it should be the same. 48 3/16. So we're going to make those 1 inch in width, just because this is a smaller bookshelf. That'll give us more space in between. Our total width is 58.5. So if each side is 1 inch width, and we're total at 58.5, 58.5 minus 1 inch is 56.5. So all of our shelves need to be 56.5 long. Now this bottom one down here is a little wider because we've got this base portion. So we're gonna make that guy 2.25 in width, and the rest of them will keep at 1.25. That way we can cover up our shelf supports as well. Now I head back over to the table saw and get all of our face frame material cut to the correct width. And one more trip back to the miter saw to get all the lengths cut for the face frames. I'm going to give everything a really good sand before we attach the face frame. It's just going to make it a lot easier for sanding later on. Now normally with face frames, I would pre-assemble the entire face frame using pocket hole screws from the backside, but this is meant to be a DIY version that anybody can do, and I know a lot of people don't have a pocket hole jig at home, so we're just going to strategically place some pin nails along the perimeter and on the shelves and glue everything down. And then just give it a nice sand and you'll come out with the same outcome. One more thing, a bonus that the pocket hole jig pre-assembly gives you is you get a nice tight square fit on everything. So all your pieces are already square and cut, and everything is assembled and screwed together nice and tight. We're going to do it this way, so I'm going to start on one end, do the side, and then do all the bottoms and shelves, bottom, top, and shelves, and come back with that final side so everything's nice and tight. All right, now the face frame is done. I'm gonna throw this thing back up on the bench actually and just fill in my little pinholes with some wood filler and come back tomorrow and sand that down, and this thing will be ready for paint. Now I'm going to give the face frame one final good sand with a 120 grit just to flatten down any imperfections and make everything look like one solid piece. After you attach the face frame, you may have a small gap like this down in the bottom, so we're just going to run a bead of caulk on that and fill that before we paint it, and any other little small spots. So at this point you can be done with your bookshelf, but I'm going to add this top to it. It just gives it a little more depth, a nice clean look on the top there. And we're just going to glue it down and attach it with some brad nails and then send this bad boy to the paint room. We've got her all moved over into the paint room, wiped down and blown off so there's no dust on it, and we're going to actually spray our paint on with our HVLP gun. If you don't have a spray gun, you can brush it on, roll it on however you'd like. We just use a sprayer because it's a lot faster and gives you a lot smoother finish. Our choice of paint for this project is Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane, a nice white semi-gloss finish. We're going to give the bookshelf 3 total coats, lightly sanding in between each, and then you're done. After your paint dries for a day, your bookshelf is complete. Thank you all so much for following along. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch all of our weekly DIY builds, tips, and tricks. We'll see you guys next week.